Lee Goldstein has been active in education in both her professional and personal lives. Graduate of Yale University, former high school English teacher, and professional writer and editor. Lee was a member of the Board of Education in Bedford, New York. When she moved to Westport, she became active in the PTA at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. Lee is now the chair of the Westport Board of Education. Welcome to 06880, the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Great to have you. And let me just jump right in here with feet first. Why? Why would anyone run for the Board of Education? It seems like anything you deal with, building a new school, redistricting, curriculum, books in the library, cell phones, start times, whatever it is, there are going to be people who are mad.
Yeah.
Why do you do it, and what's the upside?
When you put it like that, it's a good question. The upside is easy. We have a remarkable school district. My children were beneficiaries of amazing teachers, resources, programs, from the academic side to their activities, their music, their sports. My daughter was a sailor. She now captains her college sailing team. I mean, just the wealth of opportunities here and the wealth of resources. I say Westport is an education town. There's nobody here who doesn't value our schools. And I think it's our responsibility to give back, and everybody gives back in the way that they can. And yeah, people are often angry. I say, there's nothing more important to anybody than their family and our children. So school is really hits very deeply for people. So I understand when people are frustrated or hurt or angry, betrayed, because it's impacting their child. But for the most part, that's what you see publicly. That's what we read on your blog. Angry people come out, but most people, even when they're angry, are grateful, appreciative. I get so many thank yous, and people say, I know this is a thankless job. It's not. People really do appreciate. And even when people are angry about, say, redistricting, it's because they love their school so much. They love the teachers and the community. So, it's understandable. People talk about the incivility. I don't see it that way. When people come to our meetings and speak, they are very thoughtful. I think sometimes on blogs and written comments, you see a meaner side of people, a harsher side. That's mostly not what we're dealing with. For the most part, even when people are angry or upset or frustrated, they want to make things better.
A great perspective, and one that I hadn't thought of. I sort of gave that laundry list of issues. Did I miss any?
Oh, God. I'm sure you did. I'm not going to bring them up. It's enough there, right?
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It is a lot. And we never know what it's going to be. So we got through, some churn with superintendents. I got involved back when I was the PTA president at Coley Middle, and I joked that people said, oh, it's just a Halloween party and a bake sale. And then we had the implosion of the building. And that's when I became interested in being at the table, not just on the other side. But I don't know what I was saying. But the point is, I've lost my train of thought.
Don't we all? Speaking about being at the table, being at that table at the Board of Ed, those meetings seem endless. They go on forever. You talk about...
Our last one, I think, was an hour and a half. We were out by 8:30.
Okay.
Tonight may be long.
But you talk about obscure things, and you have... I've seen the packets. You have hundreds of pages to read and prepare for each meeting, plus the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that none of us are ever privy to. So what are the qualities you need or one needs to be a good Board of Education member.
Right. And now I remember that brings up what I was saying. And there's all that, everything we prepare for, and then everything that we can't anticipate. So whether it's a building imploding or a once in a lifetime pandemic or, devastating losses or threats, what you need. So I think you need a quality of discernment to be able to, first you need to be willing to go through that material. And what I think sometimes seems boring or obscure from the outside is actually the work we do. Tonight, we're going to be talking about our capital improvement projects. And, and things come up. We were looking to improve the rigging systems for the high school stage. The sound system is 30 years old. So do we add that now? So you need to be willing to get through the minutia, but it really is, that's how we spend our money. That is what the Board of Ed does. The Board of Ed has one employee, it's Tom Scarice, and we oversee him, and he has operational control. So another really important quality to board members is the ability to distinguish roles. And our role is strategic, vision, management, governance. Our role is not operation. So when you say and all the things behind the scenes that we don't know, you pretty much know everything. It's not like we have a secret cache of information that we're making decisions based on. We observe. It's the law, FOIA, and we really govern in public. So we don't have these private one-offs where we're, knowing things and making decisions. So that ability. I think there also needs to be, when you talk about people being angry, you need to be able to handle that and say, okay, yeah, sometimes that hurts my feelings, but that's not what I'm operating out of. You need to be able to distance yourself a little bit from the royal and, the churn of it all.
Yeah.
I also think a real appreciation for making decisions based on the entire system. And that gets hard when you know a school or you're part of a school community and your friends. This is a small town, right? Everybody's a friend and neighbor. Sure. And you really need to be able to separate from some of the personal stuff.
Well, you and your 6 colleagues must be doing something right because the school system is acknowledged in the town, in the state, nationally, as one of the best around. What makes it so good?
100% the people. There's the town supports us, and you cannot compare the resources we have. So that's one.
You're talking about financial or other kinds of resources.
But the human resources are what make our school remarkable. And the best thing a board can do is hire a great superintendent and get out of their way. And then if you look at the people that our superintendent hires, with the community, we just hired, a new principal for Coleytown. She's starting at the end of this month. That started with an interview process. People applied, they're screened, but then the interview committee includes teachers, administrators, board members, parents. That's the first interview. Then there's usually a second interview, and then it goes to the superintendent in central office and more administrators. So we know that when we're hiring someone, we're really getting the best people to serve our children, each other, and the community.
And anytime an institution is functioning at a high level, as our schools are, it takes a lot to keep them there. I mean, it's a constant daily job to keep them there. What are some of the obstacles that you face to keep our schools at such a high level?
Oh, what are the obstacles? We're always looking for, constant improvements. That's not an obstacle, but teachers are always, the past couple of years have had a big review of our world language programs, starting with Spanish in the elementary schools, but then looking at the whole program. So they're constantly making that better. That's not an obstacle. That's just how you change going forward. Then there are the big changes we want to make, sort of the levers we want to pull for more systemic changes. That would be the strategic plan. And we have really focused on on student wellness and student agency and voice and problem solving. In terms of obstacles, you always need more money. We'd always like to have more modernized facilities. We have, I'm going to get in trouble, but we have a state legislature that I think oversteps. And there is a law in Connecticut that districts are supposed to have autonomy and manage their own school districts. There's frameworks that you have to teach, but how you get there is a local issue. Legislators are more and more crossing that line. So, for example, every Board of Education needs to approve textbooks. And it's funny to say textbooks because we don't have a lot of textbooks anymore, but that is a board, a state demanded. The state demands we authorize textbooks. Well, now for our K-2 early literacy program, the state is saying you must choose one of these textbooks. So they're eroding local control.
Wow.
And that is an obstacle to doing what we know is best for our students and our community.
So what keeps you up at night besides meetings?
That's funny. Just the I'm not a fearful person, and I don't think bad things are going to happen, but there's a state of fear right now, and
A lot of anxiety.
Of anxiety, yeah. Just that anything bad would happen. Yeah. Whether those bad things are students using hateful language, students hurting one another, a teacher doing inappropriate things, which we don't have. I'm not saying any these things happen, but you worry about it. And then you see the stories again and again and again of school shootings. And that is always the biggest fear, security fears.
You mentioned Tom Scarice before, our superintendent. The job of the Board of Ed is to hire and fire superintendents, or not renew them. But it seems like you've got a grand slam in Tom. What's it like to work with him? And how do you work with him?
We work with Tom very collaboratively. What you see is what you get. He's very warm. He's very smart. He's very enthusiastic. He loves our schools and he loves the work we do. He loves the kids. And working with him is just, he makes a recommendation, we review it, we're critical friends, and the 8 of us are a governance team. That is the governance team. Mm-hmm. And then he's also the CEO.
So I'd imagine that you talk with Board of Education members in other towns. What do they think of Westport? How does our system stack up against theirs? Give us the dirt.
We don't. There's no dirt. We don't compare systems. I am on CABE. It's the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. I'm on the board there. I represent our area, and I'm also the Federal Legislative Committee chair. But we have a listserv with all the Board of Ed chairs in Connecticut. So it's more often we'll put out a question. How do you review your bylaws? Something as small as that to how do you respond to hateful language? And we share best practices, share mistakes we've made. I think we're the envy of a lot of towns. There's no question about that. And, we're very, very privileged.
We certainly are. Can you give me an example of a mistake?
No, I'm
You
not
know.
giving you an example of a mistake.
Partisanship. The Board of Ed is a partisan board. People are elected by their parties. By law, it can only be one
simple majority.
One simple majority, correct. How do you manage as chair partisanship? How do you keep it to a minimum? Let's talk about that.
When I moved here 11 or 12 years ago, I'd watch a board meeting. You could not tell who was a Democrat and a Republican. Even the first time I ran, if you recall, it was more, I hate to say con because we're all friends, but, Long Lots versus Coleytown kind of was how that election was going, and the redistricting lines then were very different. In the subsequent years, I think some polarization of the country and some, what do they call it, culture wars, made our board more partisan on some issues. On issues where anytime we say the word equity, I think when you saw the book challenge and the ask for the request that we remove books from our library, those divided more along partisan issues. But I can say, I'm a Democrat, among the Republicans on the board, we are friends. We get along. I can say the current vice chair is a Republican. We agree on almost every issue, except for when we talk about equity. And even there, sometimes it's a difference of language. We want to see the same things. No one on our board doesn't want all children to thrive. No one on our board supports the suppression of free speech. So you could not, when we vote on financial things, those are not partisan divides at all. When we vote on redistricting, those are not partisan divides. These are just, and it shouldn't be, right? Our schooling should not be ideological. And with any board in town, where you put the driveway at the beach should not be a partisan issue. And I think for the most part, they're not.
Certainly, it's become partisan. I know Greenwich is held up as an example of a board that has become quite partisan.
Yeah, I know that.
Nationally as well.
Yeah.
So what's under the radar? What will you be talking about or looking at over the next year or so that we're not yet talking about in town?
Look, the new school is not under the radar, but that is huge.
Long Lots.
It's the Long Lots. It's the first new school building in how many years? The redistricting will be big, the redistricting question. Tonight, we're talking about our climate survey. That's the kind of thing that might not draw as much outward attention, but is so important. How are the students and the faculty and staff and the families feeling about how our schools are welcoming and inclusive? How are our students engaged in their learning? How much do they enjoy their classes? And if not enjoy, how much are they learning from them? These are the real questions, the academic. Sometimes it gets lost, but we're a school district and, learning is the bread and butter of what we do, and that's the focus. And I think if you talk about a mistake, we are always focused on that, but I think sometimes our meetings don't indicate that. Because we get caught up in the staffing and the budgets, which are all important. I think sometimes people don't see that our laser focus is the schools, is the learning, and everything we do is in support of that. Whether it is redistricting or staffing or a new building, and equity is to support the learning of students. And so that's what we're always doing. And we need to be more explicit and open to show people that work.
Great. So we've talked about Lee Goldstein, the Board of Ed chair. What about Lee Goldstein, the human being? What got you to Westport?
I grew up in Norwalk. We lived in Poundridge, and I was on the board there. And there was a tax cap, and we had a very small home, and I had aging parents. And my husband, grew up in Greenwich. He said, let's move back to Connecticut. I took a vow of abstinence. I said, I will never go to another meeting for the rest of my life. I promised my family. And we moved here, and we moved into a house with a cottage where my parents lived. And look around. I say this all the time. What doesn't draw you to Westport? The schools, this fantastic library, the beach, the playhouse, the Levitt. Everything there is. We were just talking before we started, everything there is to do here, how rich a community it is.
And your dad, Marvin Goldstein, was a very popular substitute teacher.
Yes.
So what do you do when you're not reading Board of Ed material or going to meetings?
There's a life outside of that. My two children are out of the schools now. My daughters are senior and second year students in college. My father did die, so it's quiet in our house. But I read and walk and just the regular things, planning a trip to England in a couple weeks. I told you I'm going to Pennsylvania next week to do some political canvassing, just the regular stuff.
When you go through for your walks around town, do people stop you? And no, they don't.
I have to say no. I don't know if I'm not so popular, but people sometimes I'd say people are more likely to stop you in a Trader Joe's. Okay. Or Whole Foods. That's where I have my most conversations with people who want to tell me how they feel about things.
You're looking at the, figs or whatever, and they want to engage in the town. What's your go-to place?
For what?
Your happy place in Westport.
It's so cliched, but how do you not say Campo Beach? I wish I had something, but I think we all do that. When I have 20 minutes between things, I'll just go to the beach and look out at the water, take a quick walk. Sure. Coming downtown, coming here, the library. I'm a really voracious reader, and
it's
the restaurants.
What's your go-to restaurant?
I don't know. You're not supposed to pick favorites, right? I love Colony.
Great. Yeah, a lot of people do.
I miss Shearwater here in town.
Sure. So last question, going back to
this does go fast.
Board of Ed, it goes really quickly, just like a Board of Ed meeting. So going back to the Board of Ed, when you look back, how many years have you been on it?
5.
In those 5 years, is there any one moment, incident, time, achievement that stands out and says to you, yeah, this is why I do what I do?
I think it's more looking back over that time. It's not one thing, but when I look back and I like to ask new board members, when you look back, what do you want to see? So not to be self-centering, and it's always the team, but I see a really beautiful Coley Middle. I see a wonderful superintendent who's brought us stability and really changed the culture within the buildings. I see an equity action plan that we're implementing thoughtfully and deliberately, intentionally. I see a process now for reviewing curriculum on a cycle. So we did world language, and now we're taking up social studies. I see new and innovative ideas. So it's not any one thing, but it's sort of all those things. And I will see very soon a new long lot. So, those things, it's never you wake up one day and say, wow, that was great. But over time you look back. And I'm proud of that work, and I'm grateful to have been allowed to share in it.
Fantastic. Anything I should have asked that I did not?
No, I don't think so. It's all good. Tune into the meeting tonight and watch our work.
Tune into any meetings. They're all open.
Oh, yeah.
You got an open mic in the beginning. You can stop Lee Goldstein at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods and tell her what you think. Lee Goldstein, chair of the Westport Board of Ed, thanks for coming on 06880, the podcast.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.